Hello and welcome. I'm Leigh-Ann Gerrans and you're watching W News, broadcasting live from the Al Arabiya studios. These are our top stories. Deadly Israeli strikes hit a Gaza hospital, killing at least 20 people, including journalists, as tensions in the region continue to escalate. Meanwhile, protests over migrant housing turned tense across Britain this weekend as the government scrambles to find a solution. And Trump may sue California over redistricting as Democrats respond to efforts by Texas to redraw congressional lines. Now, at least 20 people, including 5 journalists, have been killed in an Israeli strike on Nasser Hospital in southern Gaza. That's according to Gaza's Civil Defense Agency. A Reuters cameraman, an Associated Press journalist, and an Al Jazeera employee were among the victims. The Israeli military has confirmed carrying out the strike. It said it regrets causing any harm to civilians and does not target journalists. Meanwhile, Israeli strikes also hit Yemen's capital Sana'a, killing 6 and wounding 86 after Houthi forces fired missiles towards Israel. For more on this, I'm joined from Tunis by the United Nations Special Rapporteur on the occupied Palestinian territories, Francesca Albanese. Francesca, first of all, thank you so much for taking the time to join us. We appreciate that. Following today's deadly attack on Al Nasser Hospital, you are calling on states to take immediate action to halt the carnage in Gaza. What more can global leaders do? And in your opinion, are they failing the Palestinian people?
Thank you, Leigh-Ann. I don't see member states doing enough. No single state has done enough to stop the carnage in Gaza. I learned from you and from the coverage that was just passed that Israel has recognized that it was an Israeli missile that hit Nasser Hospital, killing 15 people, including reporters and rescuers. Look, this is an attack that has been filmed and could not be denied. But in fact, there have been hundreds and hundreds of those instances, many of them filmed, in fact. Some are notorious, some are not. And Israel has killed 60,000 people by its own admission, because there is an Israeli army leaked paper that confirms, and this was circulated by Israeli media 972, confirms that Israel has killed, so only 1 out of 6 of the people killed by Israel since October 2023 are so-called Hamas combatants. And we know that what Israel defines as combatants is much broader than combatant under international law. Israel knows exactly what it's doing and how many civilians are being killed, and it does so amid members of the cabinet calling for the cleansing of Gaza, for emptying Gaza of Palestinians, and forcing the voluntary migration of Palestinians into other places of the world. So there is an ethnic cleansing ongoing, and genocide is being the means to enforce it in Gaza.
And I think it's important for us to note that the Israeli government says that it regrets any harm from the strike at Al Nasser Hospital today, and also that it is not committing genocide inside of Gaza. But, you know, we're seeing journalists targeted today, and Gaza is saying that we don't target journalists, and an initial inquiry will be carried out. But what do you make of Israel's comments? Are they purposely trying to get the reality of what's happening in Gaza not being told to the rest of the world?
I think that Israel lies and lies and lies, and it's not because of this instance that I believe it. Israel was forced to recognize and to express regret for what's happening because it was broadcasted. This attack happened while it was being reported, and this is why it was not possible. I mean, there was an attempt by some members of the army to say that it was not attributable to Israel, but again, it was too blatant to be denied. But the point is, Leigh-Ann, if we were on October 9 or 10 of 2023, I would understand this claim. But 60,000 people plus dead, and with a famine ongoing in Gaza, which risks to kill 500,000 people, and with the fact that the very Israeli army knows that of the 60,000 people killed, only 1 of 6 was a combatant. And this is something that I and other special rapporteurs have said since the beginning. 70% of the victims have always been women and children. So when you ask me if I believe that Israel regrets what it has done, no, I don't. And even if it does it allow Israel to stop its assault on Gaza and its attempt to empty Gaza of Palestinians? No, of course. And what is going on in the West Bank? How do we explain the fact that Israel is pushing the annexation of the little that remains that is not controlled by Israel of the West Bank? There is settler violence that is tormenting Palestinians as we speak, and it has been the same for 2 years. What about the death of Palestinians in jail, including doctors? What about the rape that has been used against Palestinian prisoners? Israel knows very well what it's doing, and it's doing that with intent. And this is why it's undeniable today that there is a genocide ongoing. You also have the most prominent Israeli human rights organization saying so. Physician for Human Rights and B'Tselem, together with many historians and even some members of the security service.
And Francesca, Jeremy Corbyn has confirmed that you'll be taking part in the Gaza Tribunal, which he is going to be hosting next month. Why are you choosing to be part of this, despite the former Labour leader's record on handling anti-Semitism?
I don't think that it has anything to do with anti-Semitism. Let's put this in context. Anti-Semitism is something that I abhor as a European because of our European record of anti-Semitism, meaning hatred and violence and discrimination against Jewish people because they are Jews, and I would like Jewish people to feel safe and happy wherever they are in the world. So nothing more remote from me than anti-Semitism. At the same time, scrutinizing the state of Israel is what has led many people, from the Secretary General to the Pope, and including now the President of the French Republic, to be accused of anti-Semitism. So this is the usual accusation that is leveled against people who tries to bring Israel to respect international law. So Jeremy Corbyn is a member of the parliament who has organized an initiative to bring to scrutiny the actions and possible complicity of its government, like other governments in other political realities, including in Italy. There are lawyers and parliamentarians at work to put in question the role of the Italian government. There is a clear responsibility of member states not to trade, not to sell weapons, not to buy weapons, not to exchange intelligence with a state which is accused of committing war crimes, crimes against humanity, and genocide. Any parliamentarian attempt to bring clarity and justice is to be supported, and this is why I accepted Jeremy Corbyn's request.
And also, the US Secretary of State Marco Rubio announced your inclusion on the sanctions list, citing your efforts to push international criminal court to investigate both the US and Israel. What is your message right now to both the US and Israel?
Yeah, I hope that your audience understands the absurdity of it. The International Criminal Court has been created as a culmination of efforts of all nations after the Second World War. It has taken decades to bring about the creation of the International Criminal Court, which I'm very proud it has. Its statute has the name of the capital of Italy, the Rome Statute. The ICC is there to investigate and prosecute people responsible for war crimes, crimes against humanity, and genocide, and the crime of aggression. So what is illegal of encouraging the ICC to investigate and prosecute? I've written 6 reports, and in all of them, almost all of them, I've reminded the ICC, which has dragged its feet substantively on the file of Palestine, to investigate and prosecute. And in fact, had the ICC investigated and prosecuted some of the ministers in Israel, we wouldn't have reached the abominable situation that we have faced as of October 2023. But the point is, I do believe, and it's not a case, that the sanctions against me came after my report, which puts under scrutiny the economy of the occupation, in which many private actors, banks, pension funds, investment funds, universities, and arms manufacturers and other businesses have contributed to support the occupation, and in the last 2 years to become an economy of genocide. It's not a case that many Israelis were becoming poorer and poorer while the stock exchange after post-October 2023 was going up. It has amassed $200 billion. Why? Because someone is profiting from the genocide in Gaza. And this is why I think that the sanctions have been put against me, because I was already put on notice by the US administration in May for my work, which apparently constituted a threat to the global economy.
And just before I let you go, Francesca, we are out of time, but just a quick question. How much hate have you faced personally for speaking out against Israel?
Very little. Very little, besides let's say, the pro-genocide lobby and the pro-genocide axis, meaning all the states who are doing everything they can to defend Israel in its permanent occupation, apartheid, and genocide. Wherever I go, there are thousands and thousands of people welcoming me, receiving me, writing letters to me. And seriously, wherever I go, even recently in Italy, I was in a village which is almost depopulated, and where there were several hundred people from all over who came to listen to me. So no, there is a lot of love and a lot of support and solidarity from all over. Again, this is what I hope, that this is a moment of awakening for all of us, because like Primo Levi, who, by the way, was a Holocaust survivor, used to say, monsters in life are few. But the bureaucrats who push papers to make huge crimes possible. In fact, it's with people like us, ordinary people, who decide to stop this brutality, that the change can be made.
Francesca Albanese, it was fascinating to talk to you. Thank you for joining the show. Let's take a look at some of the other stories making the headlines today. The sole survivor of the mushroom murders in Australia says he feels half alive without his wife. At a court hearing today, Pastor Ian Wilkinson forgave Aaron Patterson, who killed his wife and 2 friends with the toxic beef Wellington in 2023. Patterson was convicted of 3 murders and an attempted murder and will be sentenced on the 8th of September. Prosecutors are seeking life without parole. Vietnam has evacuated thousands of people and closed public spaces in anticipation of Typhoon Hajiki. The powerful typhoon is expected to make landfall today and marks the 5th to hit Vietnam this year. Heavy rainfall, flash floods and landslides are expected, especially in low-lying areas. Japan's Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba has bounced back in the polls, according to new surveys. That is after a month of dire results left his premiership in jeopardy. A key reason for the reversal is the premier's handling of Trump's tariffs and also trade negotiations. And finally, Sopranos actor Jerry Adler has died at the age of 96. Adler started acting in his early 60s and spent the following 3 decades working alongside stars including Julie Andrews, Angela Lansbury, and also Richard Burton. Now, tensions flared across Britain this weekend as opponents and supporters of migrants clashed following a court order forcing a hotel in Epping to evict asylum seekers. Police made more than a dozen arrests, but there were no reports of serious violence. The protests have been sparked by an ongoing issue over housing migrants in hotels. For more on this, I'm joined from Bournemouth by Tobias Alwood, former chair of the Defence Select Committee and also a former Conservative MP. Tobias, great to have you on the show. Thank you for your time. So, protests outside asylum hotels continue over the blank holiday weekend across the UK. Why can't the Labour government just get a grip of this escalating situation?
Well, you asked the very difficult question that was also posed to the previous government, because the scale of this doesn't seem to go away. Each year we have tens of thousands of asylum seekers arriving illegally on these shores, and the processing alone takes over a year for each individual. And these individuals need to be housed somewhere. And so the plan that started under the last government was to place them in hotels, in towns and cities, including here in Bournemouth, right across the country. And when these individuals who are not allowed to work then go out and perhaps interact or end up engaging with the community around them, sometimes that leads to clashes. And ultimately, everybody's asking, well, how long can this go on? How long can we keep taking more and more asylum seekers without actually deporting any or returning any because they aren't allowed here, or indeed processing them so they then become official refugees, which then allows them to have a working status. And that is a dilemma that we face. It isn't, I should say, just in this country, it's right across Europe at the moment, and it's only likely to get worse as insecurity, instability grows in the Middle East and elsewhere, and more people flee very, very desperate situations.
And also, Tobias, the latest poll by YouGov puts the right-wing Reform Party firmly in the lead over in the UK. Are the main political parties, like the Conservatives and like Labour, now being forced to really dance to Nigel Farage's tune and be much stronger on migration, almost similar to what they're doing over in the US?
Well, the US is a different situation and they can follow their own rules. Here in the UK, you're right to point at this becoming a political football. And Nigel Farage, as using his populism to full measure, making suggestions like moving asylum seekers to the Ascension Islands. This is a tiny island in the middle of the Atlantic. Physically impossible to do this. But that doesn't matter. What he does is give potential solutions, however mad, and he gains traction from it. Were Nigel Farage and the Reform Party to do well at the next election and even take power, they themselves will then realise that this problem is bigger than them, as it's bigger than Labour, bigger than the Conservatives. And the real challenge has been not dealing with the problem at source. When you look at Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, Somalia, Libya, and so forth, these are countries that are either failed states or have poor governance and insecurity. And it's not surprising that there are many that then choose to leave that very difficult environment and seek a more peaceful, stable environment in Europe. And the criminal gangs are there then to help support this industry that it now is, that brings them to Europe and then eventually to the UK. And until you start dealing with the challenges at source, all those countries I just mentioned are ones that we've been involved in one way or another, and we've turned our backs on. And then, as I say, challenge the criminal gangs that are making this, feeding this opportunity for individuals to flee. Those are the two things that are not really done on any scale, are not really looked at. And we need to work with our allies, France, Germany, Italy, Spain, these other countries too. There's no collective effort to deal with this. All we come out with is populist solutions, which is seeing Nigel Farage and the Reform Party benefit from this terrible situation.
Tobias, let's talk about the numbers and the boats crossing, because a record number of migrants have crossed the Channel to Britain in small boats this year. My question is, the border force, it clearly cannot cope with the small boat crossings and the gangs, like you do say. And a Labour peer has suggested it's time to bring in the Royal Navy and some gunboat diplomacy. Would you agree with that? Because you say the populist side and the Reform Party are just coming up with ideas that won't work. But would something like this work in practice?
Well, I just mentioned how daft it is to send all these people to an island in the middle of the Atlantic. And there we have others suggesting, let's send out the Navy. And what are they then going to do? You know, we helped create the international rules-based order after the Second World War. Are we now going to send our Navy out and puncture the rubber dinghies so that they deflate in the middle of the Channel? What are we going to do once we've sent the Navy out? Where are we going to force them to? These ideas, these mad ideas, are not thought through. They're thrown out there, and immediately they gain traction, particularly on social media, to say that's exactly the sort of strong talk that we need, without seeing the bigger picture and recognizing that it won't work. What it will do is get populist movements elected, but the establishment, going back to the point, is still failing because they are not coming out with viable solutions. And that's why I'm afraid some of these ideas are gaining traction when actually they stand no chance of being implemented anytime in the future. Otherwise, they would have been explored already.
And Tobias, another story making the British papers today is about politicians on TikTok. The Tory MP Luke Evans says his colleagues are missing out on engaging with younger voters by not being on the social media platform. Are you on TikTok, and do you think that he's right?
I'm not on TikTok. I do a lot of social media myself to push what I'm trying to say and provide more nuanced angles to many of the stories we're talking about. The trouble with TikTok is that it's very fast and furious. It's, you know, only a few seconds and so on. So you're right to engage with a younger audience. That's very, very important in politics itself. My concern is with the whole aspect of social media that it becomes an echo chamber, that we're actually losing sight of the bigger picture. And we just touched on it. Great example of finding solutions to the migration and the asylum issues. TikTok, I'm sure, is going to be awash with ideas as to how the Royal Navy should be sent in to deal with this. Well, that isn't a viable solution that any serious politician should be promoting or engaging, let alone pushing on TikTok.
Tobias Alwood, I don't have a TikTok either, so thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you.
Trump says he may soon file a lawsuit over California's redistricting efforts. This comes as Democrats in California plan to own redistricting in response to Texas redrawing congressional lines to boost Republican chances in next year's midterms. Texas could see up to 5 new GOP-leaning seats, and similar battles loom in Florida and beyond. Amid the political fight, President Trump is also planning to deploy National Guard troops to Democrat cities that are run like Chicago, sparking criticism from state leaders who call it an abuse of power. For more on this, I'm joined from Washington, D.C. by political strategist and on-air analyst Rina Shah. Rina, it's a pleasure to have you on the show today. Why are California and Texas at the center of this redistricting fight that we are seeing over in the U.S. right now?
Well, what you see here is Republicans trying to gain more seats, and that is, of course, going to give them the advantage to legislate. The more seats they have, the less narrow of a majority that they have, the better off for passing all their whims, wishes, and desires. In essence, what we see here with Republicans' redistricting efforts that go beyond just the state of Texas, because the Republicans there have really taken up the mantle in a noisy way. The governor, of course, Greg Abbott, it is a Republican, and with Republicans in the state legislature even wanting to punish their colleagues with jail time for leaving town in a way to avoid serious votes that, of course, lead to Republicans gaining more seats. What we see here is political chaos, but we know why it's all happening. You see Republicans are playing hardball here, moving beyond Texas to redraw maps in states like Florida and Ohio. This is, like I said, all in an effort to lock in House seats for 2026. And who's driving the boat here? Who's driving the strategy? It's President Trump. He's pushing Republican governors here to act fast, but what he's seeing now is that Democrats, like in California, Governor Gavin Newsom, are gearing up to counter with their own redistricting plans. So I say this isn't just about maps. It's a high-stakes battle for Congress that could really tip the balance in a razor-thin House right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was my next question to you. How could this intense battle involving lawmakers in California and Texas really impact the battle of power in Washington, D.C.? And that's the big question so many people are asking.
Right. So what you've got with a Congress that is controlled by Republicans, but like I said, with a very narrow majority here, is room not left for defections. And that is the greatest challenge that Republicans want to overcome right now. With the passage of the big, beautiful bill this summer coming in so late, what Republicans found is that their agenda isn't always going to be passed simply because they have the majority. So they want to lock in these seats for continual power that would extend beyond 2028, were a Republican not to win the presidential then as well. We see one thing happening here right now that I think is quite intense, and it's Trump's plan essentially that's been leaked, and he's kind of been open about it too. His plan to deploy the National Guard in places like Chicago, Illinois, and other Democrat-run cities. He's making this push in places like Chicago and New York because he also wants to show he can be tough on things like cracking down on crime. But what he's done with this redistricting and redrawing of the maps and being tough on crime is he's really raised a lot of alarms with local Democrats who see federal overreach happening here. And I think that is the theme we see with redistricting and crackdowns on crime. Federal overreach is something that Republicans seem to have become somewhat comfortable with in this era.
And let's talk a little bit about what the Republicans have said on this redrawing of the map. J.D. Vance has argued that this redistricting plan will make the situation a little bit more fair on a national scale. So we're hearing that from the Vice President. Do you agree with that? Or do you just think, no, it's actually about trying to do it their way and make America great again, the MAGA movement?
I think it's really important to realize what Vice President Vance has said. And in talking about new maps and bringing fairness into question here, I think what you see is an argument that's actually bolstered for that is against gerrymandering. Excuse me. This is a moment in which we have to look at how Democrats and Republicans are going about things. Gerrymandering is a tactic that both parties, Republicans and Democrats, have used over the years to ensure that they keep control in certain places. But what you see here is in Texas, you have Democrats arguing that it's gerrymandering that's being used to secure up to 5 Republican seats for the midterms, which are coming up next fall. So we're about a year out from them. And that is, again, when you bring fairness into the question, it gets a little murky here because this is all going to end up in the courts with Texas's map already heading to court. What you see here is that the fight there in Texas is reflecting a bigger national tug of war over who's controlling Congress. And so I see both sides digging in here. And what Vice President Vance's point was, I believe, was about Democrats gerrymandering in places like the state of Massachusetts. So what that really shows is that this is a two-way street. Both parties are guilty. One just happens to be a little bit more guilty in this moment than the other.
And yes, you are right about the law cases, because Trump on California redistributing efforts, we heard him speaking in the Oval Office earlier. He says, think we'll be filing a lawsuit soon. So that's something that Donald Trump is now thinking of doing. I mean, are you surprised by that at all? And also, you made a good point there. Redrawing of electoral boundaries to favour a political party is not illegal. Both parties have used this in the past. So a lot of people are saying, why such a big deal?
Well, I think more and more Americans, as we've seen in recent years, choose to affiliate not with the parties, but as independents. And that is really something bigger here that's at play. It shows that people are disenchanted with the tactics of both parties, and that even though issues like crime and public safety and economy come front of mind every couple of years or every 4 years, one could argue, it is voters who are starting to see what's happening around them. And with gerrymandering and seeing both parties do it, what you see a greater call for amongst more Americans, and something that I've been advocating for, is ending gerrymandering altogether. What more states need to enact and adapt are independent redistricting commissions that can sort of supersede the ways in which parties do this backroom dealing in order to redraw maps that benefit them. Like I said, you're seeing right now in this era, President Trump and those around him already doing harder tactics, such as sending armed guard patrols and controlling local police here in Washington, D.C., federally, for example, something we haven't seen a president do in the modern era, and which you're seeing Democrats push back with and saying, this is a president, this is a party that is continually grabbing power. And so you've got high tensions, and the only place to sort it out is the courts.
Rina Shah, it's a pleasure to have your insights. Thank you for joining us. Let's continue this conversation now with Sol Montes-Bradley, Vice President of Communications at the Gold Institute for International Study. It's always great to have you on the show, Sol. I don't know if you could hear Rina ahead of you speaking there. Should gerrymandering be outlawed altogether? Should it be allowed?
Great to be here, Leigh-Ann, and yes, I could hear some of it. And I don't see the point of it. I really don't. Districts have to be reapportioned periodically as the population grows or changes. It has to be done. Some people, like your previous guest mentioned, put their faith in independent commissions. Well, no commission is truly independent, and they're all staffed by the party in power at the moment of creation. So you have an independent commission in California and another one in Massachusetts that are staffed with Democrats and have been so widely successful that even though 40% of the population are registered Republicans, and in the case of Massachusetts, 36% voted for Trump, they have 0 representatives in Congress. So this is part of the political game. It started with Elbridge Gerry in 1812, one of the founding fathers, actually. And it has been going on for, what is it now, 220-some years. No, this is not a big problem. It cuts both ways. And it really suggests to me that it's nothing but an opportunity for what we call kabuki, political theater, with no other intention than that of projecting a national image for Gavin Newsom and nothing else. This is going to die down pretty soon. California will not be able to change much until 28 if they do. And if they do, nothing will change because they already gerrymandered the state to the hilt. Massachusetts is threatening, well, we'll gerrymander too. Oh, well, what is going to change? There are already no Republican in the congressional delegation there.
So
it's very funny.
So I just want to ask you, so is Donald Trump doing this redrawing the boundaries or redrawing the map in Texas to make sure that he wins those midterm elections and he holds on to that razor-thin majority he has in Congress. Is this all about Donald Trump just wanting to keep hold of power?
Yeah, well, I would like to say one thing. Donald Trump is not redrawing the district boundaries anywhere. In Texas, it's the legislature that is doing this, as it is prescribed by the Texas Constitution. Donald Trump may request, may ask, may suggest, but he's not redrawing. And that said, of course, President Trump has every reason to have an interest in districts that favor Republicans. And the Democrats have every reason to have an interest in districts that favor Democrats. That is neither good nor bad. It's the way it is.
So a bit of a storm in a teacup is something that you would probably think this all is. But what's next, actually, for California and for Gavin Newsom? What does come next? Because what's really interesting is there's no love lost between Donald Trump and Gavin Newsom, is there? And Donald Trump says he possibly thinks that he'll go to the courts and sue California over this. Is this just a very expensive election for Gavin Newsom, a waste of time?
Well, that's what the Democratic Party in California told Gavin Newsom when he first floated the idea. Although then they realized that, succeed or not, this is a way of placing Gavin Newsom ahead of the pack in the Democratic Party for a potential candidacy in 2028 that he's already saved. So this is nothing more than a politician hardly known outside of his own state trying to raise a ruckus nationally to get support for a national race in 3 years' time. In that sense, he wins whether he wins or loses. The motion in California, it's different than Texas. It's not just the Senate and the House of Representatives passing resolutions and sending it to the governor for signature. In California, he needs the voters to authorize this redrawing of the districts. The next election is in 26. They would have to organize one now. This is far more expensive than a lawsuit in a state that has a lot of problems, including the $25 billion they cannot find in the homelessness accounts. Mm-hmm. So whether the people of California are going to go with this or not is still very much an open question.
And just a quick question there, because Rina, my former guest, touched on this, Sol, and Trump is possibly planning to deploy the deployment of National Guard troops to Chicago and other cities. Obviously, this is raising a lot of alarms, as Rina did say, and people are concerned that Democratic-run cities are being targeted. What's your reply to that?
Well, it so happens that the most violent and unsafe cities in America are run by Democrats. So if your purpose is to reduce crime and improve the quality of life, you have no recourse but to go to a Democrat-run city, from Washington, D.C. and Los Angeles, from San Francisco to New York, from Detroit to Chicago, to Baltimore. There is a pattern. And I think that some Democrats are very much not alarmed, but enticed by the opportunity to hurl accusations at President Trump, who is acting within the law. And there is absolutely nothing wrong with what he's doing. Washington, D.C. is a case in point. The northwest of the city, where all the embassies and monuments and the White House are, is the most peaceful area of the city, though crime lately has shot up. Ever since 1973, it's governed by what we call home rule, so that the city elects its mayor and council. But by our constitution, it is entirely dependent on the president and Congress. The president is supposed to act as mayor and Congress as a city council. Even though they delegated that in practice in '73, constitutionally, the authority is there and they can exercise it anytime they want. The other 3/4 of Washington, D.C., that is not where the monuments and the embassies and the federal buildings are some of the most dangerous places in the country. It's unconscionable. There were over 360 murders last year. That's where the people work. And curiously enough, Northwest is 90% white and the rest of the city is 80% black. That black population is not protesting. It's thanking the government for finally bringing a measure of peace to their neighborhoods.
So, Montes Bradley, I'm so sorry.
That scares the Democrats in D.C. terribly so.
So, Montes Bradley, I'm so sorry we didn't have enough time there. We were just running out, but thank you for your thoughts. A reminder of our top stories. Deadly Israeli strikes hit a Gaza hospital, killing at least 20 people, including journalists, as tensions in the region continue to escalate. Meanwhile, protests erupt over migrant housing in Britain and police make multiple arrests as tensions do rise. And Trump may sue California over redistricting as Democrats respond to efforts by the Texas to redraw congressional lines. And that's all from us on W News. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and, of course, follow us on X. The Real Deal with Tom Burgess-Watson will be coming up next. Plus, we'll be back in just a couple of hours' time with W News Extra. Goodbye and thank you for watching.